The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Well, with the 70-degree weather outside, for us, it doesn't feel like Halloween is coming, but we hope all of you are getting ready with your spooky decorations and maybe you're carving pumpkins and taking trips to the orchard. We've certainly tried to Halloween up the house by putting out more decorations and doing a bunch of things. And Halloween's coming, so we thought tonight we would do a kind of different episode, but it's still kind of creepy in its own way.
Yeah, this one's going to be really good. It's something that we haven't done yet, and we've been meaning to. So I guess with that said, let's just get right into tonight's episode.
Yeah, let's do it.
Jack Parsons was an interesting man. In fact, books have been written about him, and television shows have been made about him. And yet, there's a good chance that you've never even heard about him. But as the inventor of the first rocket engine that used composite rocket propellant, and a prominent researcher in both liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets in the 1930s, he was ahead of his time. At the time of his death, he was a member of the Army Ordnance Association, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, the American Chemical Society, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. He also co-founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, among other things. So, when it comes to space exploration, everyone should know his name. But you know us, and what kinds of stories pique our interests. So, you might be wondering why we're doing an entire episode on a rocket scientist. Well, you'll see.
I mean, when the name Aleister Crowley pops up in a rocket scientist's life, you know it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, you kind of wonder how these two cross paths.
And they did. Very much so. Jack Parsons was born Marvel Whiteside Parsons in Los Angeles in 1914. His parents called him Jack because he was named after his father, so it was less confusing than having two Marvels in the house. Not long after Jack was born, his mother Ruth discovered that Marvel Sr. was spending his free time with a sex worker. Ruth filed for divorce, and she and Jack moved into her wealthy parents' house on Orange Grove Boulevard in Pasadena, otherwise known as the Millionaire's Mile. She also had Jack's first name changed from Marvel to John. Young Jack grew up surrounded by servants, but he was actually rather lonely. He spent most of his time reading, especially Greek mythology and books by Jules Verne. And then he discovered the magazine Amazing Stories. He basically read everything he could find on the possibility of space travel, and he dreamed of it one day being a reality. Plus, he really seemed to like blowing things up.
Well, what young boy doesn't want to blow things up?
But he actually did. A lot.
He's like a young Sheldon.
He is like a young Sheldon. And when he met Edward Foreman, he found a kindred spirit. The two 12-year-old boys began conducting their very own rocket experiments in the nearby canyon, but also in the Parsons' backyard, using cherry bomb powder, aluminum foil, and glue. And when Jack was bullied by other kids at school, Edward was his protector. Ruth decided to send Jack, who wasn't doing very well in public school, to a military school. But his rocket experiments ended up getting him expelled, since he accidentally blew up the school's toilets. When the stock market crashed in 1929, Ruth's parents were hit hard, and they moved to San Rafael Avenue. Jack, who was doing okay in school now and was even editor of the school paper, dropped out to help support the family. But, of course, the odd jobs he picked up had to do with blowing things up. At 18, he was hired as a janitor by the Hercules Powder Company that manufactured smokeless powders and other explosives. Jack was incredibly smart, and he was promoted pretty quickly, since he had a natural aptitude for chemistry. But he also had a habit of stealing things from work, so he could conduct his own experiments at home. Those stolen materials resulted in Jack creating a successful solid fuel rocket.
Well, it had to be expensive to get these things, on his own.
Well,
so I guess, in a way, this was a good thing, right? He was being thrifty.
And possibly illegal.
Well, more than
things.
likely. Yeah.
According to tech.caltech.edu, the stuff that he was reading in his free time was opening up his imagination and cementing his belief that one day rockets would fly to space. But he was also trying some other stuff, like making incantations to the devil every night before bed. Jack wasn't just a blossoming rocket scientist, he was a blossoming occultist. But when he feared that his incantations were actually working, it freaked him out so bad that he stopped. Jack attended 2 universities, although he never actually graduated from either one of them. The first was Pasadena Junior College, where he majored in chemistry, but he had to drop out because of finances. He later got into Stanford to study chemistry, but money became a problem again, and he had to leave. Now working full-time at the Hercules Powder Company, Jack was making pretty good money, $100 a month. But he was also suffering from crushing headaches caused by his prolonged exposure to nitroglycerin, so he ended up quitting. According to Wikipedia, Jack and Edward hoped to enroll at Caltech, and they attended a lecture there given by Austrian rocket engineer Eugene Sanger and William Bolle. After the lecture, they went up to Bolle and told him that they were keenly interested in developing a liquid fuel rocket. Bolle was impressed and introduced them to Frank Molina, a PhD student there. Molina was writing his thesis on rocket propulsion, and he formed a fast friendship with both of them. The trio applied for university funding, but Caltech basically laughed at their science fiction-based idea and said no. Luckily, Molina's doctoral advisor, Theodore von Karman, did not think it was science fiction, and he gave them the go-ahead to test their theories under the university's Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory, or GALCIT. They still didn't have any funding, but they were able to use the equipment. They called themselves the GALCIT Rocket Research Group. The three of them were the perfect working combo. Foreman was the machinist, Melina was the technical theoretician, and Jack was the chemist. They also balanced each other in temperament. When Melina was focused on reworking ideas over and over on paper for weeks, the other two convinced him to actually try them out. And when Jack had some crazy ideas, Melina was able to put the brakes on so that they didn't accidentally blow up anything else. The trio also smoked a lot of pot, and Jack began writing screenplays about his own life that were focused on science fiction, anti-capitalism, and pacifism that he hoped to sell to Hollywood. Meanwhile, Jack had also met a young lady named Helen Northrop at a church dance, and in 1935 they got married. He gave her a pistol as a wedding present.
Well, at least it wasn't something to do with explosives.
This is true. They bought a little house on South Terrace Drive in Pasadena, and Jack got a full-time job as an explosives manufacturer at the Halifax Powder Company. Unfortunately, he spent most of his paychecks on experiments at Galset. So, to make extra money, Jack set up a little workshop on their front porch so that he could manufacture a little nitroglycerin on the side. But even his nitroglycerin side hustle wasn't enough, and Jack asked Helen's parents for yet another loan, and he pawned her engagement ring. Things weren't going so well at Galset, mostly because they just didn't have the money to try out as many experiments as they needed to. So they reached out to liquid fuel pioneer Robert H. Goddard in Roswell, New Mexico. Goddard invited them to visit his New Mexico facility, but the whole time he was pretty unwilling to share anything specific that would help them. They returned to Caltech a little disgruntled, but not defeated, and within the next few months, they'd brought in several other Caltech students that were also interested in rocketry. Together, the group put together their first liquid fuel rocket test, which they decided to test near the Devil's Gate Dam in the Arroyo Seco Canyon. They picked Halloween 1936 as their test date. The first 3 attempts did absolutely nothing. The rocket wouldn't even ignite. But on the 4th attempt, the oxygen line ignited instead, almost setting all of them on fire. From then on, the group was known as the Suicide Squad.
That's so awesome.
Is it, though?
I know. Can you imagine being that age and you're known as the Suicide Squad?
I know.
I mean, you got to figure this guy was side hustling nitroglycerin, of all things, which is very volatile.
On his front porch.
I know. And he should know better.
I know. In January of 1937, the Suicide Squad had their very first successful launch. And then Jack helped out with the Canet attempted murder trial. Now, remember, Jack was largely self-taught, but he was a genius. And when Earl Canet, the head of police intelligence in L.A., was accused of conspiring to kill private investigator Harry Raymond with a car bomb, Jack was asked to help in the case. Jack was able to not only recreate the car bomb, but prove without a doubt that it would have worked. Canet was convicted, and Jack found himself considered an explosives expert by the press. Over the next year, the Suicide Squad was able to create a working static rocket motor, and Jack was asked to speak at the Los Angeles Science Fiction League, where he made a huge impression on a young writer named Ray Bradbury. Jack also helped form a secretive communist discussion group known as the Professional Unit 122. Publicly, he was also part of the ACLU, and when he refused to officially join the Communist Party, a few of his friendships within the Suicide Squad suffered. By the end of 1938, the Suicide Squad had dwindled down to just its 3 original members, Foreman, Molina, and Jack.
Well, genius has its madness.
Yes. And then there was Jack's personal life. In 1939, he and his wife Helen were invited to the Church of Thelema on Winona Boulevard. The Church of Thelema was founded by the wickedest man alive, the Beast 666, Aleister Crowley. Jack's interest in the occult, which had never really gone away, was reignited in a big way. No pun intended.
It's pretty bad, dear.
I just realized when I read it that was kind of funny.
It is funny.
It's great when your own writing cracks you up. Jack strongly believed that magic, with a K, and even black magic could all be explained by quantum physics. Jack was all in, even encouraging Helen and her teenage sister Sarah, who went by Betty, to read everything ever written by Aleister Crowley. Jack and Helen were initiated into the Thelemic Agape Lodge in 1941. They adopted the Thelemic motto, but used a mistranslation of the original Latin phrase so that its initials spelled out T-O-P-A-N, which they said really meant to Pan. And since Pan was the Greek god of nature, sexuality, music, and causing panic, they thought it was pretty fitting, especially the sexuality part. According to Wikipedia, Aleister Crowley himself was amused by Jack's misinterpretation, and he and other members of the Agape Lodge wrote frequent letters back and forth discussing Jack. Meanwhile, Jack had begun signing several of his personal letters with just the number 210 in reference to Thelemic beliefs. Jack believed that there were 4 obstacles preventing humans from achieving and performing their true will, and all 4 had to do with fear. The fear of incompetence, the fear of others' opinions, the fear of hurting others, and the fear of insecurity.
Sounds about right.
It sounds plausible.
Yeah.
If people could just get over these fears, Jack thought, they would be both enlightened and live in a state of true will. Eventually, Jack was named as a possible successor of Crowley for outer head of the order. Meanwhile, back at Galset, Molina had reached out to the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Army Corps research for possible funding for their newest idea, jet propulsion. The committee was so impressed, they gave the rocket research group, Foreman, Molina, and Jack, $1,000 to further their research. A quarter of the money, by the way, went towards repairing the Caltech buildings that they damaged during their testing.
Oh, my God. I can imagine what that place looked like.
Kaboom!
Jesus.
Despite being ostracized and laughed at by other Caltech scientists, the military believed in them enough to give them $22,000. They just had to move their research and testing off campus.
And probably out into the desert somewhere.
Exactly. their research was featured in Popular Mechanics magazine in 1940. Previous members of the Suicide Squad were prevented from helping them, due mostly to security risks, like their involvement in the Communist Party. And it wasn't so great when one of Jack's friends from the Agape Lodge used his gun during a carjacking and ended up in San Quentin State Prison for 2 years. But other than that, things went okay.
Well, yeah, there would go your security clearance pretty quick.
Yeah. They tested their jet propulsion theories with some success and some failures. And in 1942, the military gave them the go-ahead to test their liquid fuel ideas. Fearing that they could all be drafted as soldiers if they weren't successful, they doubled their efforts. During one test, their mixture of gasoline and red nitric acid exploded into such a massive fireball that it sent shrapnel in all directions. But eventually, they did it, and they produced 60 JATO engines that they sold to the U.S. Army Corps. With the money, they were able to start their very own company, the Aerojet Engineering Company, in March of 1942. Their mission was to usher in the age of peaceful space exploration. Mostly, they found themselves supplying the U.S. military with their latest inventions.
Not so peaceful.
No, not at all. Jack and Helen enjoyed their new financial freedom by traveling around the country and bringing some of Aleister Crowley's books to the Library of Congress.
Oh my God.
Jack also started meeting with the Mahania Literary Society, where he hung out with science fiction writers. Jack was actually the inspiration for the character Hugo Chantrell in the murder mystery Rocket to the Morgue, which was written by Anthony Boucher in 1942. But in June of 1941, Jack's personal life took yet another turn. And we'll get into that after this quick break. Hey, did you know? This year, of the projected $4.3 billion that people are expected to spend on Halloween, $700 million of that will be on Halloween costumes for their pets. The most popular pet costumes for dogs are pumpkins, hot dogs, and bumblebees, while cats trend more towards lions and bats. Although last year, the Demogorgon from Stranger Things was a popular choice for both. But dressing up our pets is not just a Halloween thing, and it's not even a new thing. People have been doing it for a very long time. For example, the Emperor of China was putting jeweled collars on his dogs way back in 309 BC. The ancient Egyptians were fond of their pets in jeweled collars too. Some were even painted with hunting scenes. And in the late 1400s, King Charles VII of France put his dog in expensive robes. Even Queen Victoria of England got in on the long-time trend, dressing her dog in a scarlet jacket and blue trousers, which she wrote gleefully about in her journals. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we're back. And before the break, we were saying how Jack's professional life was going pretty well, but his personal life was a whole different story. His wife, Helen Parsons, went away on a vacation by herself, and Jack, wholly invested in the Thelema religion, began a sexual relationship with her 17-year-old sister, Sarah. When Helen came home, Sarah insisted that she was Jack's new wife. Surprisingly, whether Helen was okay with it at first or not, eventually she began her own relationship with Agape Lodge founder Wilfred Talbot Smith, and the two couples remained close friends. The four of them actually rented a mansion, and they all lived together along with other members of the lodge. It was basically a commune dedicated to Thelema. They slaughtered their own livestock, not just to eat, but to use in their own blood rituals.
Well, there you go. That's convenient.
It's pretty sick already. Jack decorated the mansion with statues of Pan, his personal collections of swords and daggers, and reproduction Egyptian artifacts. They converted the garage into a laboratory, held science fiction meetings in the kitchen, and told their children to go look for fairies in the 25-acre garden. Jack liked to greet people at the door, wearing a huge snake around his neck, and he also liked playing in the bathtub for hours with bath toys. Jack wrote in his journal, "I night Don Quixote, I live on peyote, marijuana and cocaine. I never knew sadness, but only a madness that burns in the heart and brain." That's quite the catchy little lyric he's got going on there.
You could almost set that to music and jump rope to it.
Aleister Crowley was so impressed by Jack that he made him the new leader of the Agape Lodge, which was now housed in the communal mansion. Jack wasn't shy about sharing his beliefs. Theodore von Karman, Molina's former professor, referred to him as a, quote, delightful screwball. But according to Buy.org, his openness about his occult beliefs caused him to be fired by the JPL, or the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and Aerojet in 1944. It didn't matter that Jack had made huge strides in both weaponry and jet propulsion. It was just too much for Caltech, the U.S. military and Foreman and Molina, to ignore. First, there was the fact that the LAPD investigated the Agape Lodge on accusations of black magic and sex orgies, where a 16-year-old boy claimed that he was raped. And then the neighbors complained that naked pregnant women were jumping through fires. Jack was not only drinking, smoking pot, snorting cocaine, and using peyote, he was also into amphetamines and opiates. He was also known to have paid for at least one abortion for a child that he had fathered. Jack's drug use, which he never tried to hide, was too much even for Aleister Crowley. He wasn't very happy about all the drugs that Jack was using, and before long, Jack felt pressured to resign as lodge leader. But after hashing it out with Crowley, who he had never met, by the way, they only communicated through letters, he was reinstated as lodge leader. And Jack was also on to bigger and better business opportunities. He started the Ad Astra Engineering Company with his old friend Foreman. Jack also started the Vulcan Powder Company. But not too long into their business venture, Ad Astra found itself under investigation by the FBI for espionage. They apparently were ratted out by a member of the Manhattan Project for supplying some other top-secret project with uranium. The investigation didn't turn up anything, though. By 1945, Jack had begun renting out rooms in his mansion, the parsonage, to non-Thelema members. His ads in the paper said that he only welcomed, quote, bohemians, artists, musicians, atheists, anarchists, or any other exotic types need to apply for rooms. Any mundane soul would be unceremoniously rejected, end quote. Scientologist founder L. Ron Hubbard applied for a room and got one. Jack and Hubbard became immediate friends. According to supercluster.com, the two of them collaborated on Operation Babylon Working, a series of rituals and experiments meant to incarnate the Thelemite goddess Babylon. One of the experiments allegedly involved using Enochian magic. Basically, Jack pleasured himself onto magical tablets, while classical music played in the background, and Hubbard took notes about the astral plane.
All at the same time?
All at the same time.
In the same room?
That had to be quite the sight.
I don't know where I'd want to look least.
You talk about sticky magazine pages? Can you imagine a sticky tablet?
No.
It's pretty sick. Another experiment included both of them somehow using immaculate conception to impregnate any woman that they could with a magical child who would be the reincarnation of the goddess.
Any woman would do.
Any woman.
Huh.
Jack also noted that all kinds of paranormal stuff was happening in the mansion because of these rituals. They were having poltergeist activity, so objects being thrown and moved, and hearing disembodied voices. They were seeing orbs and actual ghosts. He claimed that they were using alchemy to affect the weather. Allegedly, one time while Foreman was visiting, one of the rituals caused screaming banshees to surround the mansion and appear in the windows, which scared Foreman so bad that it bothered him for the rest of his life.
Holy cow.
But more than anything, Jack wanted to invoke the manifestation of the goddess of Babylon, and Jack believed that she would manifest as a red-haired woman who rode some sort of beast. If he could just make her manifest, he could be with her forever. Jack and L. Ron Hubbard headed out to the Mojave Desert and tried one more time. This time, despite nothing really happening, Jack was convinced that their incantations had worked. And when Marjorie Cameron, a red-headed woman, showed up at the parsonage looking for a room, Jack felt vindicated. Marjorie Cameron was an out-of-work illustrator and artist, and Jack immediately began performing sex magic rituals that not only Hubbard, but everyone else in the mansion witnessed. Jack referred to her as the Scarlet Woman, and Hubbard took notes like he always did. Marjorie later claimed that she had no idea that Jack believed that he had manifested her into being. And when she told him about a UFO that she had seen, Jack believed it was further proof that she had to be the goddess. Aleister Crowley, on the other hand, was not convinced, and even he thought Jack had gone way too far, saying he felt, quote, fairly frantic when I contemplate the idiocy of these two louts, end quote. But Jack was wholly and fully invested, so much so that he literally invested his life savings and sold the parsonage for capital, so he could start yet another company, Allied Enterprises. His partners this time were his wife Sarah and L. Ron Hubbard. With the Agape Lodge now meeting somewhere else, and Sarah and Jack living in the mansion's former coach house, Jack needed to focus all his attention on the new company. Hubbard's first order of business was to convince Jack that they all needed to go to Miami and each purchase a yacht. Then the three of them, each alone on their own yacht, would sail together through the Panama Canal to the West Coast, where they could each sell their yachts for a huge profit. For whatever reason, Jack agreed to this. Now, what he didn't know was that Hubbard had secretly gotten permission from the U.S. Navy to sail to China and then South America on a writing mission of some kind. And he planned on taking Sarah and all of Jack's money with him. And that's exactly what Hubbard and Sarah did. They took off with Jack's entire life savings. Fellow Agape member Jane Wolfe wrote to Aleister Crowley that Jack was so entrenched in witchcraft and voodoo that he didn't care what he evoked as long as it was something. And he was selling statues out of his house that he claimed were filled with magical energy. Crowley responded that Jack was nothing but a, quote, weak fool, end quote, who had allowed Hubbard and Sarah to play him, and that they were probably the ones tricking Jack into thinking his house was haunted too. When Jack found out that Hubbard and Sarah had hit a squall while on one of their yachts, he insisted that he had caused it through a banishing ritual that he had performed. He decided to go after them legally, and he did get about $3,000 of his money back, but Sarah threatened him that if he tried to come after them for more, she'd accuse him of statutory rape. This part of L. Ron Hubbard's history, by the way, is categorically denied by followers of Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard always claimed that he had only tried to put a stop to Jack's delusional and dangerous activities, and he had saved Sarah from her life of imprisonment at the parsonage. With his life savings gone, Jack got a job on the Navajo missile program with the North American Aviation Company. He wasn't there for very long before the House of Un-American Activities stripped him of his security clearance due to his sexual proclivities, which they said included bisexuality or homosexuality. Totally jobless, Jack dove back into Thelema, focusing on sex rituals and attempting to achieve union with the universal consciousness. He also married Marjorie Cameron. For the next 6 years, from 1946 to 1952, Jack wrote all the time. He wrote his autobiography, an occult textbook, and several articles, most of them which dealt with controversial topics like anti-sexualism, corruption, and censorship. None of them were ever published. His only paid writing was for technical documents. He wrote up for an Israeli rocket company. His U.S. security clearance was permanently revoked when a former colleague accused him of espionage yet again, this time for requesting some technical documents before heading to Israel. The FBI investigated him and found him innocent, but by that time the damage was done. Jack and his new wife, the red-headed Marjorie Cameron, turned their laundry room into a lab where they also brewed homemade absinthe.
Nice. So explosives and absinthe.
I don't really care for absinthe.
No, we tried it and it was horrible.
It really was. I don't think we did it the right way with the drips and everything. There's a whole process to it, which Jack would have been really good at.
This is true.
You know, he's used to dealing with chemicals and things like that.
Right.
And it can't blow you up.
Well, you never know.
But things between them weren't perfect. Jack was doing all kinds of odd jobs to make ends meet, working as a car mechanic and an orderly at the hospital. Marjorie, at one point in 1947, moved to an artist commune in Mexico, and Jack turned to sex workers to help him reach universal consciousness. Eventually, the two reconciled, and they started renting out some of the second-story bedrooms. They also had some wicked parties, which were attended by members of the Beat Generation and various writers. Jack began a brand new chapter of Thelema, a simplified version that he called the Witchcraft. In 1952, there was a promise of Jack getting back into the job that he loved, explosives. It was in Mexico, at a government-run explosives factory. He and Marjorie vacationed briefly in Mexico, and Jack had liked it, especially since he didn't feel like the FBI were spying on him there. He really hoped that his new job would lead him back to rocketry, and that he might have some involvement in space exploration. The day before he and Marjorie were planning to leave for Mexico, Jack rushed to fill an explosives order for a movie set. He assured Marjorie that it would be his last batch. Police reports said that while he was mixing fulminate of mercury in a coffee can, Jack accidentally dropped it on the floor, where the chemicals mixed with other chemicals, and there was an explosion, which gutted the entire lower half of the building. Jack's right arm was severed, his left arm and both of his legs were broken, and he had a literal hole in his face. Jack was pronounced dead 37 minutes later, and he was only 37 years old. To add to the tragedy, when Jack's mother Ruth learned of his death, she immediately took a fatal overdose of barbiturates.
Jesus.
This is where it's all coming to a head.
Well, beyond.
According to PasadenaNow.com, his last words were, "But I'm not finished yet."
Don't make it sound so whiny. I have universal consciousness with the naked sex workers to finish. I'm not finished yet.
Sounds like he finished a bunch of times to me.
Why are you insisting on turning it into a joke?
Because this is rather dark, and there needs to be a little bit of light.
Like explosion light?
Like kaboom. At the time, Jack's lifelong friend, Foreman, said that he could totally see Jack accidentally dropping the coffee can. But other scientists who knew Jack said that he was always safety conscious, and they couldn't see him making that kind of mistake ever. Conspiracy theorists looked back at the LAPD car bomb murder trial and speculated that Knight, who had coincidentally been released from prison mere days before Jack died, had been out for revenge. Marjorie Cameron always believed that Jack's death was a murder and that it was ordered by Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes?
Yes, that Howard Hughes.
When does he come into the story?
Well, hang on.
Okay.
For a brief time, Jack had worked for Howard Hughes at Hughes Aviation. Marjorie always suspected that Hughes was worried that Jack would share trade secrets after he was fired.
And it's interesting, too, that, how many times was he brought up on suspicion of espionage? Quite a few times.
Yeah. There's got to be something to it.
Well, if you're a conspiracy theorist, there's a lot to it. That he was framed for years.
Could be.
Or he had his fingers in some things he shouldn't have.
Well, he was on drugs all the time, so...
That's true.
Quite possibly could have had his fingers in things that he shouldn't have.
I think he kind of did. Why are you looking at me like that? That's something that you would have said, but instead I said it.
All right. Back to the story. And then there's the U.S. military theory. Jack was moving to Mexico to start a new explosives career. He had been stripped of his security clearance to work on U.S. rockets. But what would stop him from sharing everything he knew with the Mexican government? What if the Mexican government hired him as a rocket expert? How could they trust Jack Parsons to keep military secrets from the Mexicans?
Oh. That, to me, makes more logical sense than any of the other theories. The military is more apt to get you than Howard Hughes or, the LAPD police chief guy.
Are they really? They all have power.
Well, that's true. Howard Hughes had power.
Well, so doesn't the LAPD.
Right, but I'm just saying that he was kind of a late-in-the-game player with the story.
Right.
But he was also a very powerful man.
That he was. The thing is that with Jack dying so young, we obviously can never know what he may have accomplished in rocketry and jet propulsion if he had gone to Mexico. So with a genius like that, who knows what another 20 or 30 years could have brought? But when it comes to occultism, you're really pushing the boundaries when Aleister Crowley thinks you've gone too far.
Can you imagine?
Oh my God, can you imagine this? Just picture yourself a fly on the wall watching this. Jack's jerking off onto a tablet while L. Ron Hubbard is transcribing what he's seeing.
In the astral plane.
What the hell? I guess peyote would make you do that.
I would guess. I don't know. Yeah. And the fact that Aleister Crowley is like, dude, you're using way too many drugs even for me, the Beast 666, the wickedest man in England. It's too much for me, dude.
Genius sometimes does crazy things.
I know.
And then with the right or wrong people around him.
Right.
And the influences and this whole sexual thing, it got kind of out of hand.
A little bit. And the fact that these banshees, whatever it was that they thought they manifested, Foreman, who I don't think was really into all of that stuff, he was just at the parsonage visiting. For him to be
freaked out,
scarred by it for the rest of his life, like what the heck happened around that house?
Yeah, I guess we'll never know. Unless he was doing hallucinogens with the rest of them, well, it's hard to say. If he wasn't, then this is really bizarre that perhaps maybe they did conjure up something.
Many somethings if they were screaming all around the house.
Yeah.
That's just frightening. Don't mess with the black magic, especially when it ends with a K.
I really wish that I could have been a fly on the wall for this. I would have really liked to have seen what the hell really took place from day to day.
Mm-hmm. And then he'd go to work and be this brilliant freaking scientist that was eons ahead of his time in jet propulsion and all these things.
Yeah.
That eventually got us into space.
Exactly. I still can't get over Aleister Crowley thinking that this guy's a bad dude.
He's given me a bad name. He's ruining my reputation.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed that as an October-themed episode. And if you'd like to know more about Jack Parsons, I know we always say that there's tons more in our show notes that you can...
But there's literally ton more.
Oh my gosh, this one, I mean, you could spend hours more just reading all the scientific stuff and all of the thelema stuff and just all the things together.
Yeah, out of all of our shows, this is the one you want to delve deeper into because it's going to bring you down the rabbit hole into even more.
Right. Well, Marjorie Cameron was a pretty good artist, and she painted all kinds of pictures too. We didn't even get into her paintings and, what she was doing. So check it out, everybody.
And with that said, join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.